named our guest today his Chief of Staff nearly 10 months ago. Prior to his appointment, he served as Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Communications. Our guest today went to OEMC after serving in the Chicago Police Department for 9 years, where he was a beat cop on some of the toughest streets in Chicago. He was born in Tel Aviv, Israel, and raised in LaGrange, Illinois. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the City Club of Chicago the Chief of Staff for the Mayor of the City of Chicago, Ron Huberman. Ron?
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking Jay and all the members of the City Club for inviting me back for round two. It's a great civic organization, and this is such a good venue for so many people to get together on a regular basis and discuss issues that I think matter to so many of us in so many ways. So I certainly appreciate the invite. I'm going to take a quick second here, and I certainly hope I'm not missing anyone, but I see so many members of the mayor's cabinet. For anyone who's had the opportunity to work with the mayor, I think one of the things that you quickly realize is that it is purely a team effort. And one of the things that I reflected on as I put together my remarks today is some of the accomplishments in the world of reform that I'm going to be talking about today are the work of the whole cabinet and the whole city government. It's a lot of people rallying around to try to get a lot of things done. And so I want to go through, and I hope I don't miss anyone. Maybe I'll see a few others while I'm up here, but we have Carol Brown, who's chair of the CTA. James Tyree, chair, Chicago City Colleges. Andrew Velasquez, Executive Director of Emergency Management, my old spot. Barbara Lumpkin, the city's new Chief Procurement Officer. Lori Healy, the Commissioner of Planning. Back there, Lori, how are you? Yeah. Recently appointed to the Mayor's Cabinet, Rich Rodriguez, the new Commissioner of Department of Construction and Permits. This is the city's new Executive Director of Business Information Systems, Hardy Bott, who just came on board a couple weeks ago. B. Raina Hickey, the Commissioner of Revenue. You can see B about your parking tickets. Montel Gales, Executive Director of the Public Building Commission. Montel. And then a few members of the mayor's staff. Matt Krell, First Deputy Chief of Staff. Lydia Murray, Deputy Chief of Staff, Mayor's Office. And I have to say, so many of the management reforms I'll be talking about today have been championed in so many ways by Lydia, so it's great to have her here. Joe Harmoning, who's the Acting Chief of Infrastructure. Joe. David Goodman, the Mayor's Director of Technology out of the Mayor's Office. And then we have Jim LoBianco and Adam Case, Assistants to the Mayors. Great. So it truly is a team effort. I want to start by telling a little story. My parents were here last time I did City Club, and they're here again today. So I don't know if some of you read Michael Sneed's column last week. But in Michael Sneed's column last week, it said that Ron Huberman may be up for a significant city job. So, of course, my phone started to ring first thing in the morning with people trying to figure out what it was all about. But I can tell you the first phone call came from my mother. She was demanding to know what I had been telling her all along. She said, "I thought you had a significant city job." And here I have to learn about it in a column that, in fact, you don't have a real job. So my mom, Lily, and my dad, Ellie, are here. It's my hope to win back a little credibility with them today that I actually have a real city job. Needless to say, I will be going nowhere anytime soon. Anyway, since many of you are aware, I've been Chief of Staff since last May. When the mayor appointed me his Chief of Staff, he kind of gave me three charges, and he said there are three areas that I need you to champion. Of all the things a Chief of Staff does, this is what I would like you to focus on. The first was to ensure that we continue to have taxpayer confidence in the operations of city government. He wanted me to work on reshaping city government to find different ways to deliver city services. And he wanted me to execute on his vision for government, on his vision of what he wanted Chicago to be. And reflecting on the last 9 months, it's really the mayor's vision that makes City Hall such an exciting place to be. We have a full agenda and a full plate, right? The mayor's always pushing all of us in his cabinet to ensure that we're doing everything we can do to continue to improve our educational system, to continue to see crime go down, to improve neighborhood quality of life, transform public housing. This list goes on, and for all of us who live in the city, it's stuff that we get to see every day in terms of how city government's transforming. But as the mayor keeps us moving forward in all of those key areas, right, the 101s of all the important things that city government does, he's also been sincerely committed to rooting out corruption or wrongdoing wherever it occurs. And I think that this is a story in many ways that doesn't get told in a very effective way. I think in many ways he's viewed this challenge as the same challenges he's viewed in other places. The same challenge as taking on the Chicago educational system. The same challenge as the mayor who took on public housing to make it better and make it a very different world. He's now going with the same veracity and the same focus on reform in government. So today I'd like to discuss with you what many of those reforms are that the mayor's put in place, and also some new management systems that we're putting in place in Chicago city government that I think are already starting to dramatically change the way we manage government operations from a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to take these one at a time. So the mayor's first charge to me was to help restore taxpayers' confidence. I think we all know what a difficult year it was for us in city government in 2005. We had the U.S. Attorney's Office expand the federal hired truck investigation into hiring. We had Judge Anderson, a federal court-appointed monitor, to watch our hiring. As the mayor said, we can't change the past, but we can certainly learn from it. And while reforms have been put in place throughout the mayor's 16-year tenure, it was time to ask some tough questions, and it's exactly what the mayor did of his cabinet. He brought many of us in, and he said, what are the next steps? What more can we do? What more should we be doing in the area of reform? And he really challenged us to think outside the box. And he said, let's all get together and think, how do you tackle corruption in a large government? How do you tackle wrongdoing where it's occurring? Well, the first thing we wanted to make sure we were doing was cooperating with the federal investigation. And it's exactly what we do day in, day out. Anytime they ask to see an employee, they become immediately available. We produce documents in an expeditious manner. We share with them our plan for reform to ensure we're not disrupting any of the investigations that they go on. And we believe that this is an important partnership because the mayor has always said since day one we will fully cooperate with the investigation, which is what the city has done. The second thing that was made clear is that we will work with the federal monitor. In fact, the mayor was so serious about this that he signed an executive order to all city employees mandating that they fully cooperate with the monitor in every way. There's not a week that goes by where we don't meet with the monitor to seek input of ways we can improve the process, identify what's working well, identify what's not working so well. In addition with that, we have ongoing negotiations with Shackman in the Shackman decree case. And while we share the exact same goal, and that goal is to have a hiring process that's open and available and clear to everyone, we don't always agree on the process by which we get there. And that's what is ongoing discussions that we're having. And we're hopeful that in the coming months those negotiations will be fruitful and we'll be able to lay out a new hiring plan that we think makes sense for city government. I'm very happy to say since we lifted the hiring freeze in the world of hiring, there have been no allegations of inappropriate political hiring in any way. And I think to a large part it has a lot to do with so many of the reforms that are in place. The third thing we wanted to do, and do very clearly, is send a very loud and clear message to our employees. And that message has always been consistent. It doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't matter who you know. We will judge employees' conduct by behavior which they engage in and the ethics of it, and we will not anything else fog that. There will be no special treatment, so to speak. To ensure that we got that message out to all members of city government, we started accountability forums with key city departments. Over 1,200 managers in city governments have been through these forums. They're given by myself, the Corporation Counsel, the Executive Director of the Board of Ethics, the new Inspector General, and we lay out the very clear guidelines that we are operating in a zero-tolerance environment, right? And while it's been said many times in city government before, we make it perfectly clear that anyone engaging in any wrongdoing or any misconduct will feel the full weight of management, so to speak, immediately, and that anything that we find, we will not just be seeking discipline, but where appropriate, we'll be seeking termination. We wanted a very clear message to go out to all of our employees. But the mayor made it pretty clear that that simply was not enough. What we wanted to do was find a way to institutionalize throughout city government systems that would do three things for us. We wanted to prevent corruption or wrongdoing occurring from the get-go. We wanted to be able to identify when and where it occurs so we can take immediate corrective action. And we wanted to ensure that those who engage in that misconduct pay a very heavy price. That was the 10,000-foot goal of what we were trying to accomplish. So in order to get this done, our challenge was to understand the nature and extent of how corruption might occur. And what we literally did is grab some of the best thinkers in city government, sat around whiteboards, and spent days and days and days laying out where's corruption occurred, where might it occur, and laying out all the steps. Where does it hand off? Where does it touch bureaucracy? Who are the people that might be involved? And we did it in the systematic way in order to be able to identify where we thought it would be most meaningful to try to get our hands around the issue where it does occur. And doing that and doing other research on where corruption hits the private sector and other places, because this is not something that is shared by the City of Chicago alone in any way, we put together 3 areas that we really thought that we needed to focus on. And the 3 big areas that we took a look at was first our personnel process, how we hire and how we promote and how we can ensure full integrity in that area. The second area that we took a look at is contracting. What are all the reforms and safeguards that need to exist in the world of contracting? And the third area that we took a look at is something that we called personal profit schemes, right? Bribery, embezzlement, things that people engage in on their own and are less systematic. And I want to walk you through in these 3 big areas what the city has done, because the mayor's put forth a very aggressive agenda in each of them. And let's start with personnel, which involves hiring and promotions. And the first thing that occurred was back in May, we put in a citywide hiring freeze. Just in terms of a point of reference of what was going on in city government back in May, it was before the U.S. Attorney's Office had forwarded any allegations of wrongdoing. It was before there was a federal court-appointed monitor. At that point, we realized that there were a few issues in our hiring process in different places. And so we immediately instituted a hiring freeze across all of city government until we could put new safeguards in place. We created a new Department of Human Resources that was a transformation from the old Department of Personnel and put a brand new leadership team in place. A woman named Jackie Keene came on board, and we went out and recruited some key thinkers in the human resource area from the private sector. Her first deputy is a woman named Mary Curran, who had worked in GE Human Resources before, a really talented team, and that team was brought in to manage personnel. We centralized hiring into this one entity, because for any of those who've worked in large entities like city government or large companies or other large governments, you realize that trying to ensure compliance against 50 different departments is certainly a challenge. And so we felt at this point, in order to make sure we had 100% compliance, is that we were going to pull in many of the key bureaucratic functions of hiring and oversight into hiring into the centralized entity that does the review of candidates, does scoring, does ranking, does all of those things. We believe that this is one of the things that's working incredibly well to ensure that inappropriate influence doesn't enter the hiring process in any way. This new department was also charged with going out and training city employees and those involved in the interview and hiring process to A, make sure they had very clear expectations of what the rules were when it comes to hiring, and B, make sure they had the right skill set to ensure that city government was bringing on the most talented individuals. The mayor increased the department's budget from $5.4 million to $8.5 million, and he did it with 2 goals in mind. Right? The first goal is safeguards and compliance, to make sure that in every way we were following all the rules and regulations associated with hiring. And the second main reason was, I think one of the things that has made the mayor so successful over the years is he's always been incredibly good at identifying and bringing in talent into city government. And we wanted to make sure that we had the right people in place across all arms of city government to make sure that we could recruit talent and bring them in on a regular basis, so that the best and brightest were choosing Chicago city government. And as such, the staff is going to expand this year alone by 37 different employees. Another key component of reform in the human resource area was technology. We're currently in the process of implementing a citywide system that tracks all employees' personnel files electronically and in real time. And it's our goal to go to a fully paperless personnel department. And the reason for that, I think, is very clear, because when everyone has to apply online, when you have very clear systems in place that immediately show people what are the jobs available, what is the process for getting hired in that job, and it's laid out in a very public way, it helps increase the accountability that exists. While someone may be tempted to scratch a scorecard on a sheet, it becomes much harder to do in an electronic world. And so the city is investing very heavily in technology in that area. The second major area that I want to focus on is this area of contracting. And I've got Barbara Lumpkin, who's right here to my left, who's been in so many ways championing so many of the exciting things that are going on in our Department of Procurement Services. The first thing that occurred was focusing on the Minority Business Enterprise and Women Business Enterprise program. Again, here, we wanted to assure that in every way, the people who were getting the contracts under the Minority and Women-Owned Business Program were truly minorities or women, and the people who should be in those positions. Again, we peeled away the layers of this program to determine how do we go about building integrity in such a program. And so we broke it down to the core components, which in this case were the certification program, which is how people enter that program, the compliance program, how we ensure that people are meeting their mandates, and the review process to ensure that with every single contract across the city, we're getting the services that we truly contracted for. One of the ways that this is occurring is that we're moving the process of investigating fraud in that department to the Inspector General's office. One of the things that occurred in many discussions between many members, with Barbara taking the charge on that, I'm glad to say, was that to truly find fraud in contracting takes a very high level of skill. It takes people who know about forensic accounting. It takes people who have a background in law enforcement. It takes people who can issue subpoenas. It takes a whole series of events, in essence, that need to occur to do this meaningfully. And so we felt that the Inspector General's office would be in a much better position to investigate fraud than the Department of Procurement Services. We also wanted to increase penalties. One of the things I said earlier, that some of our goals were to prevent it from happening, to detect it when it does happen, and then to force people to pay a very high price if they're going to engage in wrongdoing. So in the area of contracting, I want to talk about many of the things the mayor has put forth to increase the cost for those people who might engage in wrongdoing in contracting. In spring of last year, the mayor supported and helped pass a new state law, and that new state law was called Public Contractor Misconduct. And in the simplest of terms, what that law does is it holds contractors accountable for the same way as you hold public officials accountable. So all of those laws apply to them as well, which greatly raised the bar of how contractors who are trying to game the system can be held accountable. The mayor also supported and helped pass the law down in Springfield that extended state penalties to Chicago's Minority and Business-Owned Women program. So the penalties that apply in the state are also applying in the city. And then in February of last year, I think the mayor did a really dramatic thing that I think really speaks to his sincere commitment to ensure that in contracting we're getting it absolutely right. And what the mayor did, as some of you may recall, is he signed an executive order. And that executive order said that no one who is doing business with the city of Chicago can in any way make a contribution to his political campaign. And if you think about that and you look at how many people are actually doing that, it's a pretty rare thing, and I think it's a great piece of leadership by the mayor that demonstrates his commitment to this process, especially when you think about all the people who do business with the city of Chicago. It's thousands of vendors and thousands of contractors, and to me it speaks volumes to how he sees this issue. But reform is really, in contracting, is a very complicated issue, and it's an area that continues to focus a great deal of our attention. As I was saying before, Barbara, the city's new chief procurement officer, will soon be pulling the curtains back on a new process of how we manage contracts, both in the certification process and other places. I wouldn't want to take all the work she's done away from her, so I think we should all stay tuned and watch for the exciting things that she's going to be revealing in the not-too-distant future in that area. I think we're going to see shortened process time for contracts, and we're going to see a whole host of new accountability measures. Because while we've put a lot of reforms in place in contracting, in many ways we're just getting warmed up. There are many more things we want to do to ensure that people simply don't have the opportunity or that the system doesn't have any openings by which anyone can game the system. The next thing we did in the area of contracting is we focused on specific programs that we thought might be problematic. The good news is we traveled and investigated most of those programs. They worked incredibly well, and it was rare that we actually ever found a problem. But one that we all know we did find problems in was the hired truck program. And as the mayor said, we're currently in the process of phasing it out of government altogether. We certainly hope as city government in the coming months to announce to all of you that the hired truck program will truly be eliminated from city government. But in the meantime, we have tougher, stringent eligibility requirements for that program. We have very strict accounting of daily truck activity, quarterly reports, a new cost modeling system. All of this has reduced our cost per ton hauled with the hired truck program by 39%. So it's a great deal of scrutiny. Let me just kind of review where I'm at so far. We took a look at three big things. We took a look at personnel, we took a look at contracting, and we took a look at personal profit schemes. And you can see we have a brand new team in personnel with a new set of rules and a new set of resources. We have a brand new team in the procurement office with a new set of skills and a new set of resources to tackle that process as well. The next thing that I'm going to cover is this personal profit scheme area. These are acts such as bribery and embezzlement. What makes these a little different is they're typically schemes where an individual is profiting and it's less likely to be systematic. What we wanted to assure that what we accomplished in this area was that people really feared getting caught, right? They felt that if they did wrong, there was a very high likelihood that city government would identify them, would root them out, and would prosecute them. And so the first thing the mayor did is he also put a new leadership team in that position. As many of you have probably read about, David Hoffman was named the new Inspector General. The mayor named David Hoffman to that position because David had a great reputation for being an aggressive prosecutor, a great administrator, and a very good investigator. And it was that set of skills that we were looking for. David Hoffman has since brought on a great team onto his department. Mary Hodge, a really well-known investigator with the Chicago Police Department, who went on to run investigations in the Department of Corrections, became his first deputy. And he's brought on many other individuals, including David Grossman, and a team of individuals who actually come from the federal government who are really strong investigators. We're hoping that this federal model that he's implementing in the Inspector General's office will allow his department to do much more in-depth investigations than have historically happened, to both serve as a deterrent for anyone who might engage in wrongdoing, and equally important for those who've engaged in it to be able to identify them and root them out. In addition, the Inspector General's office staff was greatly increased. There were 13 new investigators added this year alone and 4 new administrative positions to support those investigators. As well, the technology budget for that department was increased. The city will be investing $700,000 this year of new technology into the Inspector General's office. Wireless laptops, databases, case management systems, all to improve their capacity to investigate wrongdoing. The mayor's also made it clear throughout city government that the Inspector General's office has an open door. They have new access to every database that exists in city government, in essence have a capacity to do a great deal of investigations. In September of 2005, the mayor signed yet another executive order this past year that does 2 things. It expands the power of the Inspector General's office, and the second thing it does is it forces employees to report wrongdoing directly to the Inspector General's office. In summary, it's a pretty powerful executive order because what it says is the following. If you're an employee and you happen to see wrongdoing, you happen to see theft, you happen to see bribery, you happen to see corruption in any form, it is your responsibility and your requirement to report that wrongdoing directly to the Inspector General's office. And failure to report that wrongdoing could result in your termination. It's a very powerful new executive order. In fact, the mayor wanted to make sure that every employee knew that this new commandment, so to speak, of city government was really being drilled into everyone so that everyone understood it. And so the mayor sent a letter to all 38,000 city employees laying out what this new duty was, laying out exactly how they should contact the Inspector General's office if any wrongdoing occurred in any way. And so that's a pretty powerful statement. One of the things that had occurred earlier that year was a new whistleblower ordinance, because we fully realized that if we're to hold our employees accountable for always reporting wrongdoing, we needed to make sure that we were fostering an environment where they felt safe, where they would feel that they were going to experience no adverse employment action for reporting wrongdoing in any way. And so the city's whistleblower ordinance is a pretty powerful one. It's considered one of the most powerful whistleblower ordinances in the country. And it lays out that as an employee, if you report wrongdoing, no adverse action can occur to you. And I can tell you, for those of us who are watching the radar screen of things going wrong in terms of corruption, and I'm very happy to say that there's not a lot that's hitting that radar screen at all these days in any way, is we're looking for that case that comes across where someone has taken adverse employment action against someone else for reporting wrongdoing. They will be met with a great deal of, I think, enthusiasm to make an example that in city government that is something that we will never tolerate. Something else that was put in place is a false claims and false statement ordinance last year. And this is another ordinance that allows for a few things. It allows us to fine people for up to $10,000 if they make a false claim or a false statement in the process of doing business with the city of Chicago. It allows us to sue them for 3 times the actual damages experienced by city government when they make based on their false claim or their false statement. And it allows a private individual who otherwise gets us on track of that false claim to get back between 15 and 30% of the dollars recovered by the city when we go after that person for a false claim. I don't know if some of you watch the U.S. Occupational Health is one place that we've implemented this new policy already. It was a company that was frauding the city when it came to health care. I think this is a great pinnacle example of how these new systems are working so well. The Inspector General's office rapidly investigated. They partnered with the federal government on the investigation. They issued search warrants. They went in. They identified the problem expeditiously. They flew city agents out to interview other people involved in that particular scheme. And then the Corporation Counsel's office followed by suing that company for 3 times their actual damages. And so it's, I think, an area where all of these new rules are starting to have a great impact. And again, we're always pushing this down to every layer of city government. And this year will be the first year that we're expanding ethics training to every single employee in city government, all 38,000. From the entry-level employee to the mayor himself will go through this online training on ethics across the city. You know, I made a statement earlier today in my remarks, and then I said that reforms are already making a difference. I said, as the mayor said, we can't change the past, but we can learn from it. And most importantly, we can take action. And it's exactly what we've been doing in all of these areas. And I think that the result of these things will be that where misconduct has occurred in the past, where it shouldn't have occurred, prospectively going forward, I think it's much less likely that we will see that misconduct occurring in any way. The second major focus and charge that the mayor gave me upon becoming his chief of staff was to reshape city government to better deliver city services. And so again, we sat around and we said, okay, that's a great challenge. How do you do that? How do you take a government that I think in many ways does an excellent job of delivering city services and take it to the next level? And so we began to look at systems, and the mayor said, you know what, look at who else does this. Look at who else does a really good job. Look at who doesn't do a good job. Look at the private sector, public sector. Look internationally at other governments. Who does this really well where we could take some of those lessons and bring them back to Chicago? And so we really did we did this kind of international search, and there were two different companies and two different systems that really caught our attention in how we wanted to manage city government in the city of Chicago. The first system that we looked at was General Electric Systems, GE. As many of you know, GE is a very big, successful company that is known in many ways for both their HR systems and their management and accountability systems. We ended up choosing GE because in many ways they had a scope similar to city government. They operate in over 43 countries with over 400,000 employees. We have in city government 38,000 employees with 158 distinct operating units. And we thought that they had such a diverse portfolio, and the city has such a diverse portfolio, that many of those accountability systems would fit very naturally into how we manage city government. The next thing that we took a look at were a whole variety of, so to speak, 101s that businesses are using across the country in different places in different ways. And we ended up settling on a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And many of you may have read that book or heard about it. But the premise of this book is actually very, very simple. What they did is they looked at companies, publicly held companies, that for a period of over 30 years consistently brought back greater returns to the market than the average of the market. And what they did is they analyzed those companies. And they said, what made those companies go from good to great? What was it about the DNA of those companies? What differentiated them that made them so effective? And what we wanted to do in city government and say, what are the things from the book Good to Great and of the analysis of those companies could we take home and apply back into the city of Chicago and apply those principles? So we kind of went to designing this new model of management in city government using two things, using what we had learned from GE, and the mayor sent a team to GE to see exactly how it works where, and the principles laid out in Good to Great, where we said, let's take a look at what made those companies great and let's apply them here. And so I'd like to walk you just through some of those principles and see how they're working in Chicago. I'm kind of excited to say that some of these management systems that are going in place now and already in place in a lot of pieces in city government are unique, and they're the first time they're being installed in a government, much less a government of our size. But as we know, our mayor is not a man of small thought. He's a great visionary, and he's willing to take big, bold steps. And in many ways, this is yet another big, bold step for how the city's managed. So one of the premises is a very simple one. It's first who and then what. And what these great companies did over a big period of time is they had really good systems that really just did three things. They identified who their best managers were, they were able to identify who the okay managers were, and they were identify who the bad managers were, right? And they systematically were able to consistently get rid of the bad managers. They were able to look to the good managers for promotion, and then they were able to always watch what was going on so they could make sure they had the good managers sitting in the right seats on the bus, so to speak. They could put them where they were most needed. And so as we challenged ourselves to make a system like this work in the city of Chicago, one of the things that we ended up landing on are these forums, where every Friday at City Hall, departments and managers are brought forth. And these managers are asked to present what's working well in their department, what's working well in their particular area. And we analyze that, and we give them the opportunity to present and walk through the facts and the details. What this has helped us do in a very real way, and in many ways in a quantitative way that helps us measure results, is hear and identify very easily who our best managers are, who our not so great managers are, and allows us to then, from a management perspective, take corrective action when we identify the not so great managers. You know, I'm happy to say that some of the mayor's new cabinet choices are people who have come to light in this process from within city government. Because they went through it. Rich Rodriguez, who's here, is a good example of that. Rich did tremendously well in his management accountability sessions. We realized what a great job he'd been doing in aviation, and he came to light as someone who floated to the top, and is now doing a great job as a new commissioner in DCAP. So there's a lot of ways that the system is helping us identify the right managers and the right seats on the bus. The second thing that these companies did is something called confront the brutal facts, right? And what they had were measurement systems that had in place that force people to deal with brutal problems in the organization. So we said, how do we bring this back to city government? And so we wanted to keep this pretty simple. And so what we did is we challenged departments to find all of the measurements that were key to their operations. And the average department now has over 100 measures that they use. And they report these measures on a monthly basis. And we take all these measures, and some of it might be employee misconduct, might be how many tons of garbage we pick up in a week, it might be how long it takes us to remove graffiti. And we color-code it three ways, much like a traffic signal. Green is go. That means everything looks good and that measure's fine. A yellow measure makes us think we need to slow down, let's analyze what it is, and do we need to focus more attention on it? And red is a stop, right? It means it's a brutal fact. It's something we have to stop, we have to analyze, and we have to look at. And we're able to ensure that our managers are dealing with those red measures that come up. And so it's a pretty rewarding process for our managers to go through in every department over 100 measures and say, here's our reds. And we believe it's going to help us more proactively identify problems. The next thing that's from the book is something called a culture of discipline. And I'm going to quote from the book for 1 second. But it said, disciplined people who engage in disciplined thought and who take disciplined action. They operate with freedom within a framework of responsibility. This is the cornerstone of a culture that creates greatness. In a culture of discipline, people do not have jobs, they have responsibilities. We wanted to expand on the culture in city government, especially among our management ranks, to ensure that people were attacking problems in a disciplined way. And what we meant by disciplined way is that they were using quantitative and qualitative measures. They were truly analyzing the nature of a situation before making a decision. So to get this ball rolling, we focused everyone on productivity. And we forced them to use quantitative measures when presenting a problem, right? Many of those managers who've come through these meetings would say they would be stopped cold in their track because they would say, here's what I think. And we made it pretty clear. We're not interested in just what you think. We want to know what you know. You need to back it up, and you need to make it very clear to us. We'd be in meetings literally putting up bell curves, trying to explain things in a very analytical way. And we think it's starting to have really good results. If we take a look at medical usage, as we put the heavy, so to speak, on some of our managers in the area of productivity, one of the things that they identified as a problem was medical utilization in the city. In particular, people calling in sick when they weren't actually sick. By focusing our managers on this in a very disciplined way, we were able to reduce the city's medical utilization last year by 24%. And the numbers continue to decline this year. It's in essence the equivalent of adding 130 members to the City of Chicago's payroll in 2006 without spending another dime. And so this discipline, we believe, is working in very effective ways. And the final thought in the book that I want to share with you today, to conclude, is this thought of level 5 leadership that they talk about. And they also did an analysis of what were the CEOs like in these companies that for such long periods of time did so well. And they said that level 5 leaders were those top executives who embody a paradoxical mix of personal humility and personal will. They're ambitious, but ambitious first and foremost for the company. And that level 5 leaders, and this is a quote, so I'm not calling anyone this, are fanatically driven, infected with an incurable need to produce sustained results. They're resolved to do whatever it takes to make the company great, no matter how big or how hard the decision. When I read that book and I was reading these pieces, I feel that in Chicago, our CEO, Mayor Daley, is a true level 5 leader. He's ambitious first and foremost for the city. And for 17 years, the mayor's been driven to work together with everyone in city government, other groups, to prove sustainable results in so many areas, no matter how big or how hard the decision is. And I think we could all think of many examples of very difficult decisions and bold decisions this mayor has made in a variety of areas. And this new system of management, which has really never been promoted in anywhere else in governments that we've been found, is also a bold idea, in essence, that the mayor's taken on. You know, in many ways, we think that all of these reforms in personnel and contracting and in personal profit schemes and this new management system will make city government significantly more efficient, accountable, and transparent. And I guess all of this brings me back to where I began this speech, which is that while it's often not seen in the press and while it's often caught in snippets, Mayor Daley has a great commitment to tackle face-on the challenges of rooting out misconduct, regardless of where it occurs or who's involved. I think it's the kind of leadership that I know many of us who work for him directly have always expected, and I know it's the kind of leadership we'll all be able to expect from him in every single way going into the future. And I think that I was excited to accept this opportunity to speak here today, because when you go through all those reforms that the mayor's put in place and you hear them in one place, you realize what an exhaustive list is. You realize just how much has been done over the past years to ensure that conduct is of the greatest place in city government. And so these are reforms that will work, and I think the right test of it and the right barometer will be what comes up in the future. And I'm confident that some of the allegations of wrongdoing that have occurred in the past are simply not going to happen in the future. And with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions that people may have.
Everybody but Alderman Nataris, you get behind the microphone. Alderman, because of seniority and because you're my alderman, you can ask your question from there.
What do we do to protect the public from the over-aggressive manager? By that I mean, what do we do to protect the
Okay, so the question is, how do we avoid 1984 with cameras? How do we manage, so to speak, the city's surveillance program to ensure that it doesn't become, so to speak, Big Brother? It's a great question, Alderman. I think we've already started in many ways. There's very yeah. There are a variety of policies that the city put forth as they expanded its network. The policies are really clear, and because the tape is recorded for a certain amount of time, we always audit those tapes. And the rules are the following. First of all, there's no hearing devices on any of our surveillance systems whatsoever, so it's only visual. Second, we only allow the cameras to be pointed on the public domain, right? Street, sidewalk, alley. It can never be pointed in someone's yard. It can never be pointed in someone's home. And the third thing we do is everyone who uses one of those cameras and has access to those cameras have to go through First and Fourth Amendment training so that they can articulate and they're perfectly clear about what the Supreme Court and the Constitution allows in terms of surveillance. And the fourth thing we do is we audit those tapes to ensure that the way that they're being used are truly for public safety. We think that these blend of policies are working and working well. And I'm glad to say the cameras have been in play for multiple years now. And there's never been an allegation or a case where anyone has shown in any way that those cameras were used for anything but a pure public safety purpose. So thank you for the question.
Mr. Ratner. State your
Hello.
name, please. State your name.
Hetty Ratner, Women's Business Development Center. Your presentation was excellent on the reforms on contracting, but you mentioned certification, and the issue of certification has been a very difficult issue that is being addressed both by the city, the state, and the county. And it has been successfully, privatizing of various programs have been very successful in the city of Chicago and in St. Louis and in Dallas. They have privatized certification so that it is totally depoliticized and is done with the most rigorous standards by private certification entities, or they call them the third tier certification. Is the city considering privatizing or outsourcing the certification of its minority and women business enterprises?
Great. Thanks for the question. I agree with you. It's a very complicated issue in terms of certification. And I will say this, everything's on the table. There are many factors, obviously, here that we have to consider. And, Barbara's, I know, always presenting different thoughts and ideas to the mayor on what the best way to tackle this is. I think the city certainly recognizes the following. It recognizes that we need a more expeditious certification process and that we need a process that has all the safeguards that you talked about, including totally objective third-party analysis. And so those are the objectives that we have. Right now, we're in the process of analyzing all the options and taking a look at what makes the most sense. And so while we certainly can't say in any way we're outsourcing at this point, but we can say that we're taking a look at everything and that everything's on the table.
Any other questions? Answered all of them. There's a professor.